This episode of New Politics was released on the 4th of October, 2025, and produced on the lands of the Wangal and Gadigal people.
The Labor government continuing with its slow and steady pace, but will it be enough to ward off the far right? There's a new leadership challenger for the Liberal Party who's lurking in the shadows of the 1960s, and that's Andrew Hastie. And Donald Trump's peace plan for Gaza is more like a real estate brochure, so why is Anthony Albanese supporting it? I'm Eddie Djokovic.
I'm David Lewis. All of this is coming up in this big episode of New Politics.
Friends, this is where one of the oldest choices that both our parties made. In Australia and the UK, Labor, as a movement, chose democracy. We chose Parliament and progress over protest. And make no mistake, when we chose democracy, we chose the hard road. Because building to last takes time. Delivering change is more difficult than just demanding it. Working within the system is tougher than railing against it. And creating solutions requires more of us than just shouting slogans. In a democracy, being a party of government means grappling with uncertainty and complexity.
Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has just ended his international tour, which included a visit to the United States to address the United Nations and then onto a high-profile visit to the United Kingdom, where he met with King Charles and ruled out a vote on an Australian republic. And don't know why he felt that he needed to go all the way to the UK and decided to make that announcement just at this particular point of time, but that's another issue, I guess. And then after that, he went on to deliver a keynote speech at the UK Labor Party conference where he talked about Australia's economic progress under his government, and that includes falling levels of inflation, rising wages, and interest rates finally starting to ease. And his message to Keir Starmer is that Labor in Australia governs with stability while the Conservatives are all in disarray. And that's certainly the case in Australia, but I don't think it's the case at all in the UK. Albanese also talked about the threats from the far right, which is having an influence in the UK. Keir Starmer's approval ratings are tanking and Reform UK is surging in the polls. And if an election was held in Britain today, the UK Labor Party, which won 411 seats out of 650 seats just over a year ago, would lose in a landslide to someone like Nigel Farage and Reform UK. Now, David, the politics of Australia and Britain are quite different, but there's similarities in the performances of the respective Labor governments in both countries. Both are governing mostly in an un-Labor-like manner. They're behaving more like Conservative parties, but with a different face. And the electorates in both countries, in Australia and in the UK, they've been calling out for massive changes to the way that government operates and in that link between the public and elected representatives and how they all work or how they all should work in the public interests. And I think that Labor in Australia had that good fortune in coming across Peter Dutton in the last term and having the Conservative side of politics in complete disarray. And their slow and steady caution did result in a landslide victory at the 2025 federal election. But in the UK, slow and steady caution has been rewarded with a lot of political pain and a British Prime Minister who looks like he's totally out of his depth. And both governments, I don't think, have really picked up the messages from their respective election results. And they're both in radically different positions because the Conservative parties in Australia are disorganised, but the Conservative side of politics in the UK, led by Reform UK and Nigel Farage, is not. And that's probably the key difference between the two parties.
Starmer should never have been made leader of the UK Labor Party. Jeremy Corbyn was on track to be Prime Minister till he was undermined by his own side. The attacks from the Conservative Party were terrible, etc., etc. But to be expected. You can't criticise a party for going after one of its natural opponents. You can criticise how it does it and whether the arguments are good and all of that. But if the Conservatives are saying, oh no, this Jeremy Corbyn guy, we might give him a go as Prime Minister, something's very wrong. The Labor Party, however, hated Corbyn because he brought in elements of the Labor Party in Britain, and I suspect here too, although it's a bit less obvious here, but in Britain, there's elements of the Labor Party who hate the working class, who hate immigrants, who hate disabled people. They went into Labor because Labor is probably more amenable to the types of welfare that these people wanted, that middle class welfare that the Conservative Party like but pretend not to like, of course. But Labor Party will. So one of Starmer's first acts was to cut disability funding, which was a cruel and inhumane and pointless and destructive piece of policy. He hasn't been so gung-ho as to commit troops to Gaza yet, but I don't think they've been asked. I imagine, despite his words, that if they were asked, he would be like Blair and put troops into. And let's not forget, and we'll be coming back to this, Tony Blair was disastrous. He's one of the worst people to have ever run a country. He's very charming and he's very charismatic, unlike others we might mention. But he committed Britain to wars based on false premises that they had no business being in and profited from it. And Starmer's in the same mould here.
And Tony Blair and Keir Starmer are very close. Or close friendship and also close ideologically.
Close, yeah. The Blairite years were disastrous for the Labor Party. Why was Labor in disarray for so long? Why was Labor losing to people like Theresa May and Boris Johnson, and now are under threat by the obvious conman, Nigel Farage? And we can look at the Lib Dems too, although the electoral system works against the Liberal Democrats, so let's be a bit fair to them. But really, Farage shouldn't be anywhere near Parliament. Labor should be stomping over the Conservative Party. Now, the Conservative Party is dying. Kemi Badenoch has not shown the strengths that most Conservative leaders have shown, shall we say. I'll put it that way. And there's no one really to replace her. So wings of the party are saying, oh, maybe we should merge with Reform. The Conservative Party of Disraeli, of Macmillan, of Churchill would have treated an obvious spiv like Farage with the contempt that he draws upon himself. And he's part of the Conservative Party saying, hey, Lee, let's merge with him, which is desperation, absolute desperation.
Well, it seems like the Conservative Party in the UK and the Liberal Party in Australia, they're going through the same sort of process of difficulty as well. But I guess my point is that we're focusing on the Labor Party or the respective Labor parties in the UK and in Australia, but sometimes for me, it just feels like all governments start to look the same. And during the week, we had the Albanese government quietly expanding the contract with the US private prison group, that's MTC, and that's increased to $790 million to manage 100 asylum seekers on Nauru. And that's $157 million each year to a company which has got a long history of negligence, bribery scandals and other lawsuits in other countries. So that's public money, very little transparency, and there's certainly no accountability. And I'm pretty sure our good friend Scott Morrison would be very happy with this sort of arrangement. So that's what's happening in Australia. So they've also got similar things going on in the UK. But within the Labor government here, we've also got other issues going on which are most un-Labor-like as well. We've got Paul Brereton, the head of the National Anti-Corruption Commission, and I think we might have to start saying the so-called National Anti-Corruption Commission, but he's been providing critical support to the Inspector General of the Australian Defence Force, even though he said several months ago that he'd actually stepped aside from that role. And I don't know if he feels like he's not getting paid enough in his role as the head of the National Anti-Corruption Commission. His salary is $817,000, and I think with all these other side issues as well, he ends up getting close to $1 million. And so if he's got that amount of income coming in as part of his job, not sure why he needs to take a couple of these additional contracts on the side as well. And he's also had to recuse himself from 6 defence cases. And I think This overall process, I know we're bringing up all these little examples about Nauru or the National Anti-Corruption Commission, but for me it just confirms that the Labor government was never really serious about this National Anti-Corruption Commission. They set it up in the way to protect vested interests and suck up to the establishment instead of challenging the establishment and the institutions that are in place. And this is something that we would have expected from a Liberal Party government. And once again, I think Scott Morrison would be very proud of the work that Anthony Albanese has done with the National Anti-Corruption Commission, because it's not finding very much corruption at all. And the head of the organisation might be a little bit corrupt as well.
It's been a disaster, really. It should have really swept out, cleaned out, flushed out the lingering corruption from old appointments, from 9 or 12 years or whatever it was of Liberal Party mismanagement.
It was 9 years, but it felt like 12.
It felt like 12.
Maybe even longer.
Yeah. And I know too, you've got to be careful. You don't want to be seen as having a witch hunt against your political opponents. But the evidence in Robodebt was overwhelming. The evidence in various procurements was overwhelming that this was not right and this was not good. And it should have been dealt with properly. It's not just to punish those that had done it, but to make sure it didn't happen again. And that the Labor Party could have been a model in how to run an honest government. Now, let's be fair, an honest government isn't necessarily a good government, but honest is much better. Honest is the first step because honest mistakes, honest bad policy can be fixed. It's much harder to root out corruption. I'd prefer an honest, good government, by the way, just make that perfectly clear. Labor hasn't been completely disastrous, unlike their predecessors.
But I don't think they've been a disaster. It's just that thing about we expected so much more. We expected so much better, and we're just not getting that.
Yeah, it's a bizarre place we find ourselves in with a government that wants to be a reformist government. Don't forget, Anthony Albanese comes out of the left, the radicals. Now, and people point to his attitudes at 25 and 26. So he's now 60-something. Your attitudes are going to change. That's okay. Your mind can change. Your thoughts can go through. You may go the wrong way. You may go the right way. But to point at somebody's words at 25 and then hold them to them at 65 seems to me to be a little bit unreasonable. Some people, of course, get more radical. Some stay pretty much the same, but they do modify some of their beliefs.
Well, I'm now to the left of Fidel Castro.
Yeah,
I point that out.
I did the political compass, and I was to the left of Noam Chomsky and all these guys who...
But this is one issue that we complained about during the last term of the Albanese government, and I think a lot of people got sick of us talking about it constantly, but it's that
and
thing
welcome
about...
to you. Welcome back to everyone.
But it is that meandering process of government, that cautious approach to government that Albanese now seems to be talking to his counterparts in the UK about, that slow and steady approach to government, just doing bits and pieces here and there. And because they received a massive majority at the 2025 election, I think they feel that this is the reward for the slow and steady and the cautious approach. Now they're doing the same. And if you're not doing that much work during your first term and you get a massive majority, well, David, you know that government is hard work. And why would you do all the hard work if you get rewarded for not doing that much? And instead of thinking, well, hang on, we've got this massive majority, not because we were absolutely brilliant and the public loves us, but we got that massive majority. Well, sure, we might have been a competent government, but we got that massive majority because we were up against a pathetic leader in Peter Dutton, and the Liberal Party was in total disarray. That's why they got that massive majority. And David, we've always felt that progressive governments should always do a lot more when they've got the chance, as in when they get into office, because whenever the Conservatives are in office, so they just bring in the wrecking ball. They bring it in, they wheel it in, they destroy the joint, and they don't really have to worry about too much about what the public thinks, because they've pretty much got the media on their side and they're supportive of these sort of actions, and they just go ahead and do it. And then they bring in all the fear and loathing at around election time, scrape over the line, which is what they did between 2013 and 2022. 9 years of rubbish government, but essentially the Conservatives just pretty much did as they pleased. And maybe, just thinking this through, maybe disillusionment is the biggest issue for this Labor government in Australia. And if people are thinking in the electorate, oh gosh, the Labor government promised all of these things and it's not happening, or it's not happening quickly enough, I'll start looking around and consider some next options at the next election. And if people are getting or starting to get worried about immigration and these cultural identity issues, mainly because of some good old-fashioned Australian racism whipped up by the mainstream media, we might start seeing something like Reform UK affecting electoral outcomes in Australia. And maybe that's an issue related to this slow, steady and cautious approach, and not doing things that are that different to the Liberal Party. If we're looking at Nauru or the National Anti-Corruption Commission when they were in government, and that's the issue with the cautious approach. If you've got this case where a lot of the things around you start changing very quickly, you might not be able to react to these changing circumstances quickly enough because you've been too slow, you've been too steady, and you've been too cautious.
You'd think that politicians would be aware of legacy and impact, and you'd think that having climbed the greasy pole, having wiped out all your opponents on both sides to get there, whether you're a cabinet minister or prime minister, you'd think that you'd want to leave some kind of positive mark. Maybe, you reformed the welfare system, either way, if you're Liberal or if you're Labor.
Boost public education.
Yep, fixed public education. Maybe you lowered the tax, made the tax system more effective. Stuff that maybe not everybody will agree was a positive change, but certainly with what you have been saying all your career, certainly what you've been known for could be seen as that. John Howard fails at that because he didn't make Australia quite a better place. He made it a worse place. But he tried. I guess we can say that as a fair...
We don't have to be fair with John Howard.
No. But Morrison, for example, left nothing positive. Albanese government still has a chance to bring in more stuff and big ticket stuff. Every time we criticise them, we get people, rightly too, bringing in, they've had these achievements and those achievements. And that's true. And sometimes when you're speaking off the cuff, you forget this stuff. And so it's nice to be reminded. Sometimes, though, it's these achievements have been cancelled out by stuff like this Nauru thing, by stuff like the NAC, by stuff like their bizarre support of Benjamin Netanyahu, which has been, I know that they've recognised Palestine as a state and all of that. And with the support of Netanyahu is the support of a genocide. Now, for a lot of people, that's the end of it. No government who supports a genocide will ever be a valid government. And that's not unreasonable. For other people, you've got to look at the full picture. This is foreign affairs, and their foreign affairs isn't moral. They're stuck in various alliances and treaties, etc., etc. I will leave the moral judgment to our listeners as to which side they fall on. And I guess I'd say I would prefer they not support genocide. But the slow and steady has improved the economy somewhat, let's be fair. But you have a Reserve Bank that acts counter to the interests of the economy. They've kept interest rates on hold this month when there should have been another cut. Most economists expected another cut, but Michelle Bullock and the board, not unanimously it seems, have decided to keep them on hold, meaning that money is a little bit harder to get, money's a little bit more expensive if you can get it. It's slowing things down for reasons that we can't quite articulate. I think Anthony Albanese's out of nowhere claim that, after meeting with Charles too, that we won't be going for a republic anytime soon. Now, I know that the disastrous voice referendum would probably be a factor in his thinking, that the other side are just going to wreck it. And so there's no point in having an expensive referendum. I can see that. I think that's not totally unreasonable. But unless you're going to be in for 25 years, which seems possible at this point. Having said that, I remember towards the end of the Howard years telling a class I was teaching that I can't see that John Howard won't be in for another 10 years. And within 6 months, he was gone. That's how quickly things happen around here, in every country, really. But they should be working. They did their term of consolidation and settling in, and I get that. You're not guaranteed a third term. So you'd think the second term would be, right, let's ramp it up a bit. Let's build on our achievements and undoubted achievements, don't get me wrong. And let's get in some stuff that if we are to lose the next election, or if we were to come in a minority government and people that we have no idea really, we assume that it'll be Teals who don't align with Labor. They only align with Labor in certain things. The Teals are generally ex-Liberal who want a more moderate Liberal party. So Labor can't expect the support nor the absolute guarantee of the Teals, and they can't with the Greens either. And that's where the Labor vote will bleed. It'll bleed to the right into Teals and to the left and extend to the right with the Greens. Now, this might give us a whole new form of governance in Australia, and that's a great thing, potentially. I better not say it is a great thing. It could be a total disaster. But if the change is right and ready and happening, you'd think Labor would want to be a part of that change. But looking at it from the outside, it's possible that there's a tide coming. It's going to wash away Liberal Labor and a lot of the older systems for these newer systems coming through. I see it in speaking, particularly to younger people who are sick of the system, who've seen the system as something that has taken away their opportunities rather than given them new opportunities. And it's not all younger people, of course. There are younger people who've done very well out of the system. But if the change happens, you should be either going down saying at least we achieved this, or part of the change.
This is New Politics with Eddie Djokovic and David Lewis, the best podcast on Australian politics and news commentary. You can support us through Patreon and Substack, and also find us at newpolitics.com.au.
Four months on from their crushing election defeat, the Liberal Party is still trying to work out what it stands for, and the opposition leader Sussan Ley has been quick to lay down the law, issuing so-called charter letters to her shadow ministers which set out key performance indicators, spell out her expectations and warn against freelancing on policy. Now, this is all a clear attempt to avoid the chaos that was a big part of Peter Dutton's leadership that led to a massive election loss for the Liberal Party in 2025. But it's also, well, it's pretty obvious, but it's also a way to keep a check on Andrew Hastie. Now, he's the Shadow Home Affairs Minister, and he's been quite prominent on social media, releasing this kind of material.
Today we're being told that we can forget our past forever, that we can no longer build physical things of value in this country. And both the Liberals and Labor have let us down in the past by letting the car industry disappear from our shores. And now Anthony Albanese and Labor are trying to cut us off forever from our proud heritage. They want to fill our streets with silent, soulless cars made in China, packed with tech that we didn't design and that we don't control. It's not just about the cars. It's this sense that we've lost something, that we're now just helpless consumers. The Australian people are at our best when we unlock our innate God-given drive to design and build complex things like cars.
Now, David, it's all fine for a leader to keep a potential opponent at bay, but generally a leader who feels secure in their position usually doesn't need to impose this kind of discipline, especially when they're in opposition. And Sussan Ley did promise a fresh direction for the Liberal Party, but so far she's holding back on the detail, waiting for post-election reviews to finish. So maybe some of this is out of her control at this stage, but it just leaves the party without a clear vision. And in politics, that vision often gets filled with division, gets filled with ambition and infighting. And I think the question now is whether Sussan Ley can keep her shadow cabinet together for long enough to start this rebuild, or whether these fractures within the party will continue and continue to cause trouble for her and the Liberal Party.
She didn't really have a honeymoon period. almost from the day she took over as leader, Sky After Dark was saying that she can't last, that there's movements against her, that she's not the best candidate to run for it. Certain journalists in more hinged publications and productions, as opposed to unhinged, also suggested that she was really just a stopgap till more qualified candidates could consolidate their position within the party. So now, how much of this is to do with her own personal failings as a leader, and how much of it to do with good old-fashioned sexism, and how much of it is to do with big egos not being satisfied with that they weren't even considered, is a matter for debate. And it's probably a combination of the three of them in varying forms. I don't think she's been absolutely horrible as Liberal Party leader. She's tried to distance herself from the thuggish, toxic Dutton years, and from there the Morrison years and the Abbott years, in ways that were at least genuine in the attempt. I'm not sure that she quite managed to do that, but I think she genuinely wanted to promote the Liberal Party as something for nearly every Australian rather than as for the blokes. She can present, not always, but she can present well, which Dutton really only did once, and that was in his concession speech. Again, this is not to say I think she's a future Prime Minister or that I would like her to be Prime Minister or I would vote for a Liberal Party that had Sussan Ley as leader. I'm trying to be as objective as I can and work through what the matter is. Why haven't they united behind her? Now, it was a crushing defeat too. She can't be held fully responsible for that, though she was part of the shadow cabinet. I think that there's a lot of shock and grief in the Liberal Party, which leads to irrational decisions. Andrew Hastie is problematic. He's a soldier, and soldiers have rarely done well in politics because their way of thinking of the world is a bit different. Not wrong, not necessarily wrong.
It is different, but it might be wrong in the context of what a political leader needs to bring along to the table with them.
He doesn't seem that he's got a terribly curious intellect. I think he settled on his worldview at a very young age and has either not seen much of it change or has ignored those parts where you might see a change. I vaguely knew his father, who was a Presbyterian minister in Ashfield, New South Wales. And you'd see him around the traps because I was living in the area. But I can't comment on Andrew as a person like that because I don't ever remember meeting him. I might have met him when he was a child.
Oh, sure. But I think the point is that whether we know any political leader personally or not, that doesn't really make that much difference because we have to look at what everyone else is seeing. Not very many people know politicians personally anyway. But I think the other point is that potential leaders or a leader doesn't know what they'll be like as a leader until they actually get to the position. And maybe Sussan Ley is finding that out at the moment. And it's going to be the same for Andrew Hastie if he does ever become the leader. He will not know what he is like as a leader, and nor will his colleagues until he actually becomes the leader. And he might think, wow, this is not what I expected. But he is making a lot of noise within the Liberal Party at the moment, and on net zero, on immigration, on reviving the car manufacturing industry, even though it was the Liberal Party that got rid of that. And these are not just policy differences. He's giving signals out to the electorate, and it's actually more targeted towards his colleagues because the colleagues are the ones who choose a leader, not the electorate itself. And it's an obvious leadership pitch. And if it's not for today, then it's for tomorrow. And the message is clear. If Sussan Ley fails, and he's doing his best to make sure that Sussan Ley does fail. If she does fail, he's putting his hand up and saying, look, I'm over here, I'm available. But I think the thing is that the thing that is working against him is the disdain that all the other Liberal Party state divisions do have for the Western Australian branch as well. And Julie Bishop didn't get one vote for her colleagues during that leadership challenge that installed Scott Morrison in 2018. She didn't get one vote. Well, she got her own vote, but of course she was going to vote for herself, but she didn't get any other votes from anyone else. And I think the other issue is that being a smaller state, Western Australia, it's going to be hard to lobby colleagues if you don't see them on a regular basis and you can't see them face to face. And also there's not that many to lobby in Western Australia. So it's hard work if you're an MP from Western Australia or South Australia or Tasmania, although we did have a Prime Minister from Tasmania a long time ago, and you may as well forget about it if you're from the ACT or from the NT. So that sort of counts against Andrew Hastie. But the recent video on car manufacturing, and we played a snippet of it before, it's got that distinct nationalistic tone, and while it plays very well to a niche audience, the over 70s blokes who like their Ford Falcons from the 1970s, he's won them over, but he's probably already won them over anyway. And he also said that we're all feeling like strangers in our own home, and that's a nice bit of racism in disguise, and again appealing to those voters who would probably already vote for the Liberal Party anyway. So it's hard to know where this is going to land, but so soon after an election result as well, they had their leadership vote about 2 months ago. He could have put his hand up, but he didn't. So it's pretty unusual to see this sort of campaign, this leadership challenging process, or this sort of behaviour from a wannabe leader so soon after the election result.
The historian in me is thinking of prime ministers from smaller states. We had Curtin from Western Australia, but who was born in Victoria and moved to Western Australia to basically kick the drink. Hawke from Western Australia, but he had a Victorian seat because he lived in Melbourne as an adult. Lyons, as you rightly mentioned, from Tasmania. Gillard from South Australia. She was representing the Victorian seat.
So it is hard work.
Hard.
It's either been New South Wales or Victoria, plus a few smasherings from Queensland.
Yeah. And
one
then
from Tasmania, one from Victoria, none from South Australia, and none at all from the NT or the ACT.
Yeah, and that's why shouldn't somebody be qualified from the Northern Territory, provided they are sane and capable and able to do the job?
Oh, for sure. They could probably all be qualified, but the point is that because you're coming from a smaller state, you haven't got enough people to lobby face-to-face to make your challenges. Or
that's exactly right. Curtin was an extraordinary person by all accounts, a very strange man, but extraordinary. Hawke came out of a Victorian base anyway. Lyons was the right person at the right time. He'd split from the Labor Party and had a gentle charisma that no one else in the non-Labor Party had. So circumstances play a big part of it. And but basically prime ministers are going to come from New South Wales, where you can get your factions behind you, Victoria, where you can get your factions behind you, and then the hard work of getting factions behind you is not likely to pay off in the short term. I think that's fair to say.
But it's not so much the state that he comes from, it's the agenda that he's trying to push as well. That's the big thing.
It's an agenda that's failed, twice now. And really, that he would say we'll bring car manufacturing back when it was Joe Hockey who destroyed the car manufacturing. And he did that really because it was a highly unionised force. He didn't care about the jobs. He didn't care about having an industry that was vibrant and that did well in exports. He just wanted to reduce union influence and saw it as a way of doing so. There were all other reasons given, but no one believed them. And Joe Hockey wasn't smart enough to articulate them. Joe Hockey was one of the less bright members of the Australian Federal Parliament since Federation. He wasn't the least bright, but he certainly fell in the bottom half, and probably in the bottom half of the bottom half.
But manufacturing itself, that's not a left or a right agenda. It just depends on what the economic needs of the country are. But generally, Andrew Hastie is pushing a hard right agenda. He's trying to import that style of the MAGA from United States and Reform UK in Britain. But you said that it doesn't work in Australia. But could it work in Australia? And I'm not sure if it can, because we did see what happened with Peter Dutton in the last election. But like Trump, Andrew Hastie is starting to rail against net zero, renewable energy, throwing out those inflammatory words about immigration, and even giving warnings to the Liberal Party that the Liberal Party will die if it doesn't act. That's similar to Trump when he said, you'll all go to hell if you don't change on energy and immigration. So Andrew Hastie is trying to do the same sort of doomsday style of politics, and even with the car manufacturing industry, bringing that back. That's what Donald Trump wants to do as well. So I guess the real issue is that unresolved struggle within the Liberal Party that we've probably seen for 2 decades, really. The cultural war, politics versus pragmatism that is usually at the centre of politics. And right now, it's performances like this from Andrew Hastie is leaving the Liberal Party fractured, it's leaving it uncertain and vulnerable. And so we've said all of that about the Liberal Party, but I don't think the Labor government can be too complacent about this sort of situation either. Labor has got the massive seat majority that we've talked about before, 94 seats to 43, but the primary vote gap is a lot closer. It's 34.5% to 31.8%. So I think that should be a warning sign to the Labor government. And that's why we always say in politics, well, you do what you can when you can, because if, and it goes back to what we were talking about before, if Labor plays it too safe, it's too cautious, well, what will they have to show if they're turfed out in 2028? And sure, it's unlikely. We've talked about how unlikely it is for the Liberal Party to win at the next election or for the Labor government to lose. So it's unlikely, but it's never going to be impossible. And we can see that Andrew Hastie, he's not being too cautious about what he's putting out there. He doesn't seem to care about whether it's sanctimonious claptrap and a nostalgia for a world that never really existed. He's just going out there and going for it.
This belief that whenever the Liberal Party loses, it was because it was never right-wing enough. And I don't know how far they want to go. I thought Dutton was about our tolerance level. But it seems Andrew Hastie thinks, no, we need to go a little bit further right. What's the Colin Buchanan song? A little bit further north every year? No, not Colin Buchanan.
Well, it might be a process of going to the right, but it's also going back in time. So it used to be this longing or a nostalgia for the 1980s and then 1970s, then 1960s, 1950s. I'm just wondering how far back in time they can actually go.
I actually suspect go back where we could do things like pass the White Australia policy as the first major piece of legislation passed in the House of Representatives. It wasn't the first, but it was the third passed on the day or something. The other two were basic administrative stuff that had to be passed before they could do anything else. I think that's where they want to go. They want to stop immigration altogether. Now, the debate on do we bring in too many people in terms of numbers is a debate that environmentalists say, but they've been stymied because it then breaks down to where do we get these numbers from? We get them from all over the world. We don't look at where someone's come from or what their racial or cultural background is. We get them from, will you obey the law? Do you have a skill that we could use? Are you able to live in a manner commensurate with Australia?
And which football team do you follow?
After then, it shouldn't matter, but they keep making the debate about cultural issues. Oh, if we let in this type of people, will they undermine our way of life and suddenly we're living under this type of law? If we bring in this type of people, suddenly we'll be speaking a language that we're not used to which the Indigenous people say, yeah, I wonder what that's like. And yet Hastie's whole idea of this false past, this golden age, which never existed and can never exist because we live in a world set up by Hastie's types that just doesn't work in the way that they want it to, no matter how badly they want it to. You can't change everything and you can't go back, and you've never been able to go back.
This is New Politics, available through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Audible and YouTube, and also available to support at Patreon, Substack, and at our website, newpolitics.com.au.
What the future holds for the Palestinians, no one really knows, but the plan that we put forward today is focused on ending the war immediately, getting all of our hostages back, getting everything back. Hard to believe when you even say it. and creating conditions for durable Israeli security and Palestinian success. Israeli security is going to be involved. We're going to help you. We'll be there with you in terms of helping with security. We want to make sure it works. We just want to make sure it works. There shouldn't be a shot fired. Now, there will be, I guess, because that's the way it seems to be, but there shouldn't have to be within a few days. There shouldn't have to be a shot fired.
Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has welcomed the latest peace proposal for Israel and Gaza announced by Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu, urging all sides to engage seriously and bring it to life without delay. His deputy Richard Marles has also called it a moment of hope, highlighting the need for a ceasefire, the return of hostages and humanitarian aid into Gaza. But that's about it. If you scratch the surface just a little bit, there's a wide range of contradictions within this plan. And while there's a belief within the international community that stopping the killing, preventing displacement and ensuring Israeli withdrawal are the main goals of the plan, Netanyahu has already declared that the Israel forces will remain in Gaza, and he's flatly rejected a Palestinian state. And the people that will be involved within this plan also raise a lot of alarm bells and warnings. Donald Trump is going to be the chair of the Board of Peace, and having Donald Trump involved in anything like this is always going to be a disaster. The person who should be wanted for war crimes at The Hague for his role in the weapons of mass destruction fiasco and the invasion of Iraq in 2003, Tony Blair, he's been proposed as the administrator of this Board of Peace, and that would be like installing Hitler on the board to create the State of Israel just after the Second World War. And Jared Kushner will also be involved. He's the son-in-law of Donald Trump. So it's not so much a roadmap to peace. It's more about Gaza being remade as a waterfront property development. And we discussed this last week, David, that all the announcements to recognise the state of Palestine at the United Nations were probably a fig leaf for these countries of the West to be seen to be doing something but actually not doing anything at all. Now, we only suggested that was a possibility, but we'd have to wait a little bit to see how all of this pans out. But, David, we only had to wait less than a week to find out how shallow all of that stuff at the United Nations last week was. And it was all a facade. And this plan, it just pushes genuine statehood further out of reach for Palestine. That's pretty much all it does.
It's to make an agreement without Palestinian representation. And I know that there'll be those who say, but Hamas is only one section of Palestinian voicing. And I do agree that Hamas needs to be reformed. And a lot of its leaders, of course, don't seem to be any more honest than anyone else. They haven't held elections they haven't held elections for years. 2007. And that's not good for any democratic government. Yes, they set up the terrorist bombing that killed thousands of people. And so Hamas doesn't have to be part of it. But Hamas isn't Palestine any more than the Liberal Party or One Nation or the Young Socialists or whoever your most despised groups are.
And there's also 7 other political groupings within Palestine. Yeah. None of those have been part of these discussions, nor is anyone else from the Arab world.
Yeah, no, I know that there's a misconception out there that recognition of Palestine is the same as recognition of Hamas, and that's just not right. Hamas are extremely unpopular within Palestine, and the reason they haven't held an election is that they are likely to lose it, and each year that they go on, they're going to lose it, but worse and worse, which is why they're not holding on. Is this a good thing? No. Is this something that should be supported? No. Does this mean that all Palestinians are in the same boat? No. It's the argument from people who know better has been, if we support Palestine, we're supporting Hamas. And that's not true at all. That's, as I said, it'd be like if you've been a diehard Labor voter all your life, being told that the only true Australians are the members of the Liberal Party or the members of the Nationals. Are they true Australians? Yes, they were born here or they've got citizenship or they're working towards citizenship. It's good enough for me. But are they representative of all Australians? By no means. And this disingenuousness of those saying, it's all about Hamas and Palestine is Hamas, is completely wrong. And it shows, when you break it down, it shows the weakness of the whole argument about Palestine and the weakness of the Netanyahu government or the Israeli government as a legitimate concern within the Middle East.
And people have asked us, well, what's this proposal all about? Can you please analyse it? And that's what we're trying to do today. But I guess the question is, what exactly are Anthony Albanese and Richard Marles supporting here? Because this peace plan on Gaza is just so vague, it's so contradictory, and it's entirely in Israel's favour. And so, well, as we discussed before, it's a one-sided deal that doesn't even include the other side at all in the discussions. And at the heart of it is a board of peace chaired by Donald Trump and with people like Tony Blair and Jared Kushner. Now, there's no clarity on who else is going to be involved, how it would function, or who makes the calls. And I guess that if Donald Trump is the chair of this board of peace, he'll make all the choices. And I've got a feeling that it will almost be as Orwellian as the Gaza humanitarian fund that has killed almost 3,000 Palestinians while they've been searching for food. And all of this is just an open front door for domination by outside powers. It's very similar to what was set up in Iraq as well. So the Palestinian Authority, well, it's only allowed to go back into Gaza if it undergoes unspecified reforms, which have got no criteria. There's no timeline for when all of this has to be done, and everything will be decided by this board of peace, which will probably end up becoming a board of war or a board of genocide. Board of genocide doesn't have the same good feeling to it. And the issue is that Israel is getting concrete guarantees and will pretty much get everything that it wants. Palestinians will get all of these undetermined conditions, delays, empty promises, and absolutely nothing at all of what they want. So this isn't a peace plan. It's a forced surrender, pretty much, designed to shield Trump, Netanyahu, and Israel from any form of accountability.
I saw a meme the other day that said something along the lines of, all of the world's problems are being caused by three men in their 70s whose sole aim is to keep out of jail: Trump and Netanyahu and Putin.
And soon to be joined by Tony Blair.
And soon to be,
Well, he's not trying to keep himself out of jail, but he probably should be in jail, I reckon.
He definitely should be in jail. He sent Britain into a war based on what were obviously false pretenses. And they tried it again. Iran has weapons of mass destruction. Where? Google Maps will show you that Iran does not have that facility. Iran has a terrific ground army and probably does drones and all of that. But you don't have the storage capacity, and they might be underground and well hidden. But it's now getting ridiculous. I note they've moved away from that argument over the last couple of weeks as its ridiculousness is. And the best way to deal with these guys is ridicule. Don't take Trump's arguments seriously. Laugh at them. When he tells a lie, tell him good one. Tell me another. Because that's the one thing they can't handle. Mel Brooks, the comic, got it right. That's why he spent half his life laughing at the Nazis. If you make them ridiculous, you can't be scared by them. And if you can't be scared by them, they have no power over you. And this is true of Putin. Comedians have gone to jail. And Trump throws Jimmy Kimmel off the air and Stephen Colbert off the air. And of course he didn't, but he did.
Hasn't thrown us off air yet.
Hasn't thrown us off yet. I expect, hold on, there's a knock at the door. Oh, no. These ridiculous, pathetic people protecting their own privilege and trying to not be accountable for the wrongs they have done, whether in office or before they got into office or both, shows just how sad the world is at the moment. Things have to get better.
And also within Gaza and within Palestine, there's deep scepticism about this peace plan. And many residents and many commentators within Palestine, well, they're dismissing it outright as unrealistic, even as a farce. And they're right about this. It's a proposal that's filled with terms that the US and Israel know that Hamas will never accept. They've been given 4 days to accept it. I'm not sure if they will. But it just means one thing alone, that the war and the suffering will keep on going on. And at the heart of any peace deal or negotiation, the first duty of the international community is to stop the killing and stop the brutality, even if a solution isn't a just solution. That's pretty much what happened in Bosnia all those years ago, where Bosnia was recreated with a series of states that were federated. and it did give the perpetrators of the crimes within Bosnia a state within a state. So effectively they were rewarded through the Dayton Accords of 1995. So that was an unfair deal, and as unfair as that deal was for the Bosnian Muslims, the killing was stopped and the war was ended. That's the main concern for the international community, and for Bosnia Herzegovina, it's been like that for 30 years. So no more killing, war's over. It's an unfair solution, but at least all of the killing and bloodshed was stopped over there. But in Palestine, they're not even trying that. They're trying to implement a highly unjust solution, probably will implement that highly unjust solution, and that won't stop the killing. So they're getting the worst of both worlds. They don't even seem to care about that. Instead of stopping the killing and the bloodshed, this plan will probably more than likely lock it in, and then the rest of the world is going to pat itself on the back.
And the point you made about Trump looking at it as a real estate deal, and he wants to put Trump Towers on the beach there. And that's how they got uncommitted American support. I have no doubt that none of it will happen. I also have no doubt that the Palestinian people will get through this, as difficult and hard as it is. The world is slowly turning. And yeah, as you said, in Bosnia, they stopped the killing. And the Dayton Agreement wasn't perfect by any means, but thousands of lives were saved from a horrible, premature, combat-related death. Thousands of young people weren't conscripted into armies based on a false premise. Thousands of buildings weren't razed. And that's what we need to be aiming for in Gaza, plus the removal of those who would stop this.
That's it for this episode of New Politics. Thanks for listening in. And if you'd like to support our style of journalism and commentary, please make a donation at our website at newpolitics.com.au. We don't beg, plead, beseech or gaslight you about journalism coming to an end. We just keep it very simple. If you like what we do, please send some support our way. It keeps our commitment to independent journalism ticking along. I'm Eddie Djokovic. Thanks for listening in, and it's goodbye to our listeners.
I'm David Lewis. We'll see you next time.
Baby,